Out now on DVD from Film Movement is an Austrian film from 2021, Hinterland. This takes place in post-World War I Austria, and we follow a lead character who was a soldier in World War I, who was a prisoner of war, I believe a Russian prisoner of war, and along with a bunch of his other fellow POWs have just been released. This is like a year or more after World War I is over, and they go back to their hometown in Austria to find it not the town they left. They find this place to be not welcoming to the returning soldiers, not offering much in the way of a way to get back on their feet. And there's crime and there's prostitution and everybody's out for a hustle and a buck. And it's really not too groovy a place to be. So the storyline, as it were, that's the setup. The storyline is that someone is murdering returned destitute veterans, World War I veterans, who are all basically living as homeless people on the street. Somebody starts murdering them, sort of like a serial killer. And our main hero, who has also a returning destitute veteran, who had left behind, a wife, perhaps a child, and a life when he went off to war. He was preferably, previously, police inspector. So he is called in to help try to solve the crime of who is murdering his fellow veterans. And this becomes this kind of creepy, cool, dark police thriller, serial killer movie. I don't know that I would call it a horror movie, but the murders are pretty graphic, so it's got that element to it. And interestingly, this film was shot predominantly on green screen or blue screen sound stages. So pretty much everything you see in the film that isn't the actors and maybe an object they're holding or sitting on is computer generated. And I knew that when I requested this disc as a review copy. And a lot of times that bugs me. A lot of times it absolutely takes me out of the film because it looks phony. It didn't here. There were times where I could tell people weren't really where they were supposed to be. But the acting in this is very good. The writing is good. It's very well directed. The score, this is really well done. And the backgrounds are just cool. They create a post-World War I Austria that you probably couldn't create without hundreds of millions of dollars. And they do it pretty realistically for the most part, but they also make it a little bit skewed, which is cool. It's not super obvious. It doesn't hit you in the face, but if you look at the details, it's there. Backgrounds kind of twist a little bit. There's some nods to like old German expressionism films. Some of the MC Escher-esque kind of vibe to it. It reminded me at times, the use of that CGI and blue screening, it reminded me a little bit of Sky Captain in the World of Tomorrow, which I really liked. And at times, the movie itself reminded me of a film called Zedtropa, like a 90s indie foreign kind of paranoia thriller. It just had this odd vibe to it. It wasn't a super weird in its presentation of those backgrounds, but in the director commentary, this has got a director's commentary, which is done in English. He explains that what they were going for was to have that world just in tiny ways a little bit distorted, which mirrors the mind of these guys who are returning home from war, who are PTSD, shell shock, whatever you want to call it, and they're coming back to a world that's like what they left, but not the same, a little bit different. And it's really, really well done. The production design is gorgeous. It's dirty, gross, and ugly, but also gorgeous. The architecture is fascinating and disturbing. And that goes for interiors as well. You'll get a wide shot of a room where the ceiling will slope up in a really weird way, and you're like, something's off about this. It kind of feels a little bit like a nightmare, which is what the lead character is experiencing. He's back to a place where his wife and daughter are gone. They've left, presuming him dead. His life is the shambles, the pieces of his life are still kind of there. He's trying to pick up. His apartment is still there. His housekeeper is still there, but everything is in a state of decay. And now the only people who can share that experience with him, the people he's been through war with, the people who understand what he's going through, are being killed. And he's the guy who has to try to figure out who's doing it and stop it. And it was really well made. This is a movie that probably will fly well under everybody's radar. It's an indie, it's Austrian film with subtitles released by a small video company. But I thought this was really good. This is the kind of thing that I hope people will see. People who like a good police thriller, who like a good foreign thriller, who like apparently relatively accurate historical depiction of that era, which an era that I really knew very little about, not being somebody from Austria who was around in World War I, despite how it looks. And that's something I like too about the director's commentaries, that he gets into that a lot. Like, this is what was going on. This is what these people went through. This is what this area was like. Like, he really talks about the historical context for the film as he points out the technical stuff and the character motivation, and talks about apparently the actor who's the lead in this is a big actor in Austria. Not that I would know, because I'm not into Austrian movies all that much. So anyway, then extras are a handful of very short making ofs, but I found them fascinating because it was like a side-by-side where you would see the image that the camera captured of all these people against a giant sea of blue, and what the end scene looks like, which is a person walking around a sea harbor, or what you get to see what elements were really there versus what was added later. So there's a few of those, or like there's a screen wipe that goes back and forth and shows you both ways. I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was extremely well done. So available now on DVD from Film Movement is Hinterland.